Hi, Brian Lehrer here. Up next, Brian Lehrer Weekend. 3 of our favorite segments from the week packaged together for you to listen to on the weekend. So enjoy, and I'll see you back on the radio Monday at 10 a.m. on WNYC and WNYC.org.
By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. And a landing on Mars will follow. And I expect to be around to see it.
That was President Obama in 2010. This week, maybe some of you saw it, he put that in writing in an op-ed column on CNN.com. So who's ready to go to Mars? I'm guessing... Yeah? All right, from the green space to Mars. I'm guessing my next guest might sign up. Neil deGrasse Tyson, director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History and host of the podcast and National Geographic Channel TV show Star Talk, which now has an accompanying book. If that's not enough, he's the co-author with fellow astrophysicists Michael Strauss and J. Richard Gott of a new book called Welcome to the Universe, an Astrophysical Tour. Welcome back to WNYC, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Thanks, Brian. Hi. Thank you.
And welcome to the green space. So the first
This is where you are. This is where you hang out on Fridays at the green space.
Yeah, we just come out and hang out down here.
Chilling in the green
whoever
space.
walks by, come on in. The first chapter of the book, Star Talk, is What Do I Pack for Mars? So are you all set to go?
No. Well, so whoever is designing the ships to go to Mars, I want them to send their mother first, right? And if that's safe enough for their closest family members, then I'll consider going. But yeah, if you're going to send me to space, give me a destination. None of this, driving around the block. And it's time to go somewhere. And by the way, there's plenty of reasons to do so. It's not just for science. You can do it for tourism. You could do it for business reasons even. And that may be the ultimate driver of it all, to turn a space program into a space industry.
Yeah, because it is something that people may not have their minds around in terms of the reasons to go for a destination that's far away. I mean, low orbit may not be sexy, but my understanding is there's a lot of science that can be done because you're out of the Earth's atmosphere that's very applicable to life on Earth. And there are some people who criticize spending a lot of money when there's still so much poverty on Earth and other problems on Earth to go gallivanting around even the solar system.
Yeah, I have heard less of that lately than in the old days. It used to be we can put a man on the moon, but we can't solve the poverty problem. Well, interesting fact today, we can't put a man on the moon. You can't even invoke that, actually. But I think people do see space a little differently now. Especially since we know that you find grandma's house with a GPS locating system on a smartphone that involves assets that many of them are ground-based, of course, but just the space. So your phone's access to that information is from towers, but the satellites are orbiting the Earth. So space as a frontier of discovery and of ways that life on Earth can improve. Just think about this. Suppose we're all in a cave, this 20,000 years ago, we're all in a cave, and someone is ill. And other people in the cave say, I want to go explore across the valley. Someone says, no, let's solve all our problems in the cave first before anyone leaves the cave. That today you'd look at that as a stupid decision because cures and food and water and all sources of ways to keep you alive exist outside of the cave. And so to say, no, we have these problems and we're going to solve them first, that's just short-sighted.
So, listeners, some of you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson introduces himself on Star Talk as your personal astrophysicist. So now's your chance to ask him some questions. Raise your hands if you're here in the green space, and we'll come around with microphones. Or listeners, call us 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692.
A quick point about the clip that you played of President Obama.
Yes.
I was at that speech. He gave it at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and it was what concerned me about it is when Kennedy said, let's put a man on the moon, return him safely to Earth before the decade is out, most of that time would have been under his watch had he not been shot and had he gotten a second term, which is not unrealistic in the day. So he was prepared to invest political and financial capital to that goal. But now we live in a time where President Obama can say, in 2030s we'll go to Mars, under a president to be named later on a budget line not yet established. And so I don't know what it means for a president to commit multiple elections in the future relative to what Kennedy did in the 60s.
Interesting. We have a clip from Star Talk to play. This is you with Whoopi Goldberg. And actually, before we do that, why don't you set this up a little bit? Because you describe Star Talk as being where science and pop culture collide. So you interview a mix of pop culture and science figures?
No, well, occasionally there's a science figure, but if I interview a scientist, it's because they're into something else that directly affects pop culture. And so the goal of Star Talk is not to bring you science as the focus. It is, we have celebrities hewn from pop culture, people you've heard of, even if you're not even necessarily a follower of theirs. So Whoopi Goldberg is a great example. And in that interview, I'd like to think I've provided a geek safe space for the celebrity to share with me secrets they might have about, have they memorized digits of pi and they can't tell their friends? Or do they have any secret fantasies about, is there some bit of curiosity within them that just needs to be fanned, some embers that we can ignite? And so with Whoopi Goldberg, we learn that she's totally into the superhero genre, and she shares her thoughts on this.
And in this clip, what she wants in a superhero. And I guess we'll get that Whoopi Goldberg clip in a minute. Let's try it again.
If it's the case that one day we can have compute...
Brian Green, Monday.
Yeah, I know.
Yes,
we have. Yeah, that's the second clip. Here we go. Here's Whoopi. I think.
That's the present.
I'm a woman of a certain age who's always grown up with Superman and Batman and Supergirl and all of the DC and Marvel universes. And there's nothing out there for us. For women of a certain age, I want to see, somebody who saves the earth, who looks a little bit like me, whose behind is a little bit bigger, whose chest is on the floor. But when that is a superpowers...
I don't think... I don't think Donald Trump's reading that comic book.
No, I know, but so I don't know where else someone with the stature, the pop culture stature of Whoopi Goldberg would be able to share that kind of sentiment. And so, like I said, it's a safe space for that. But what we do is you come for the celebrity, but in fact, the whole conversation that unfolds is all about science, and it's a way to clad science onto the scaffold that is pop culture that we all bring to the table.
Superheroes and super colliders. Let's take a question from the audience. Yeah. Right over there. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
You're so generous with your time. I know at the AMNH you have so many events that you put so much of your heart into and your time, and you're so busy. Where now with new technologies, where do you get your information? How do you keep up with what's happening all over the world now?
Okay, that's a great question. First, I have access to a cloning machine. So all the times you see me there, that's a holographic clone. So no, it's very hard. But so a couple of things. If I want to know something that hit today, I just look at my Twitter stream, and I have enough followers there that they say, "What do you think of this?" And have you seen this clip? Many a time, I've been introduced to a YouTube clip of some importance that may have had like 100 views on it. So I feel like this community of people who support what I do are also part of my eyes and ears, my sensory system out there. And that's for sort of come and go pop culture things. For more scientific discoveries, I have colleagues and their journals and things that would be more typical. And my wife, who reads the New York Times every day, she'll just send me links every time because I can't scan it and pick the stuff out, but she knows what I need and like. And my kids, they keep me plugged in to anything that anybody under 20 cares about, because that's a whole other thing going on there. So it's multiple sources, but thanks for that question.
All right, we have to take a break, and then we'll continue with Neil deGrasse Tyson here in the green space. And you may have been making a joke about having holographic clones, but we will play that Brian Greene clip, which actually comes frighteningly close to that as a potential reality. So stay with us, Brian Lehrer on WNYC with Neil deGrasse Tyson live in the green space. From the green space here on WNYC this morning. Quick reminder that we have 2 more Friday morning green space shows coming up before the election. The next one is 2 weeks from today, Friday, October 28th, when Mayor de Blasio will do the Ask the Mayor segment live from our stage, and MSNBC host Joy-Ann Reid will also be here to talk about the campaign. For tickets, go to thegreenspace.org, thegreenspace.org. See some of you down here 2 weeks from this morning. Neil deGrasse Tyson is still with us on the Green Space stage, director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History, and host of the podcast and National Geographic Channel TV show Star Talk, which now has an accompanying book. And if that's not enough, he's the co-author with fellow astrophysicists Michael Strauss and J. Richard Gott of the new book, Welcome to the Universe, an Astrophysical Tour. Let's see, we have some good geeky questions coming in on the phone.
Bring them on.
Let's see if I can do it. The technology is a little different down here in the green space, but let's see if I can get Eric from Hackensack on the line here. Eric, we have you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi there. And you're on with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Hey.
Yes, it's a great honor here. I have a science question. We know from Professor Hubble that the universe is expanding. The stars are moving away from each other at increasing speeds. We also know that anything that has mass will gain mass as it approaches the speed of light. So will there come a point in the future where these stars will gain so much mass that they'll be forced by the laws of physics to come back into a great big cosmic egg or something?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So in Einstein's relativity, the general theory and special relativity, there's an interesting distinction between something moving through the fabric of space and the fabric of space itself stretching. And so the Hubble expansion that we all know and love, that is the expanding universe discovered by Hubble back in 1929, we've only ever measured the universe to be expanding, and it is also likely accelerating in that expansion for a mysterious reason, by the way. So if you say, well, what reason is that? It's mysterious. but when it's the fabric of the universe expanding, you're not going to get this increased mass phenomenon that goes on when you are moving through the fabric of space. And for this reason, for example, the entire universe can expand faster than the speed of light. So there are none of the traditional restrictions that we get moving through space apply to the expansion of space itself.
And it may be expanding even more than we have previously realized. Knowing you were coming on today, a friend of mine emailed me this article from the Huffington Post just from yesterday. Headline, "The universe may hold 10 times more galaxies than we thought." And it says, for decades, astronomers had put the number at 100 billion to 200 billion, but new around the difference between 200 billion galaxies and 10 times that and the implications for us. But you know this?
Yeah, so actually, my master's thesis, I predicted there'd be 10 times as many galaxies out there in the universe. So I have to check on where they're going with that. I made a prediction, but what matters in the end are observations. It's fun if there are more galaxies. More is better, I think. But galaxies are made of stars. Stars may have planets and people, or at least one of them has people. So what would be weirder is not if we found more galaxies than we thought, but if we found a different kind of thing out there. So don't be so concerned or have existential angst learning that there are more galaxies than you previously thought. In the universe, generally, we find more of what we thought was there rather than less.
Here's a good geeky question from a good geeky town. Linda in Princeton. You're on WNYC.
That's for sure a geeky town, yes.
Let's see if I can get Linda on the line, if I'm geeky enough to operate this phone box here. And producers, maybe you can help me with this. Get line 8 up. And what we can do in
It is work because you're just banging keys on your laptop there.
That is what I'm doing.
That doesn't always just get one.
And when I'm in the studio upstairs, that actually works. But,
it's like the old days with rabbit ear TV. You slap the TV on the side. There's some leftover behavior from...
Yeah, but you know what it is? It's like I go home and tell the family, well, the way I put callers on the air is that I just knock the keyboard a few times. And they say, that can't be true. And I say, come down to the green space and watch. So now that I'm in front of witnesses, of course it doesn't work. Here's another thing that may or may not work. It's one more clip from Star Talk, and this is of you and World Science Festival founder Brian Greene.
Physicist, yeah.
And hold on to your conceptual hats, folks, because this is about not knowing what reality we're in as virtual reality technology becomes really, really realistic.
If it's the case that one day we can have computers that can recreate a reality in bits and bytes that has such verisimilitude that they're inhabitants of those simulations that feel that it's real, if that's possible, and I think many of us agree that it might be.
Sure.
We're getting close already. Just let's assume that's possible. It's so much easier to create a simulation than it is to create a real universe. I mean, how are you going to create a real universe? Right. So if you wait long enough, there are going to be many, many more simulated universes than there are real ones. So any sentient being, if they're rational, will think that the odds are that they're in one of those simulations because there's so many more of those compared to real ones.
Statistically, you're in the simulated one, not the real one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. So get over it. No. It's consider if you can simulate a world with such precision. He used a bigger syllable word there, verisimilitude, but with such precision and accuracy that you create beings that have entire neurological function, bordering on free will. Then they will just think they're alive. And if they're alive and they have some kind of free will, and they're advanced enough, they might create a simulation within themselves, just to simulate their own universe. And then it'll be simulated universes all the way down. So if you throw a dart at all the universes that exist as a random choice, we could be simply in one of those. So we could be invented by some kid in his parents' basement, some alien kids. And this would completely give us why laws of physics are this way and not some other way. It's because some kid invented it. Think if you play a game, like if you play Mario, Mario jumps and can go off the cliff but then scurry back. There are whole laws of physics that apply to the game. If I were in that game and curious, I would measure the laws of physics operating in that game. They'd be different from ours because somebody programmed it in. And if you jump off, you can scurry and not fall down and come back to a surface. That's that universe's laws of physics.
Would we all need goggles?
Yeah, it depends, yes. So where anyone who's thought about that problem is pretty much in agreement with it. So, yeah, you can choose to not want it to be true, but like I said, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you.
Now I think we have Linda in Princeton. Linda, you there?
Hello, Brian.
Hi there. You're on WNYC with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Brian and Professor Tyson. Brian, I'm glad, given your keyboard talents, that you're not operating a nuclear power plant.
You should be glad. You should definitely be glad. We'll leave that to the Homer Simpsons of the world.
By the way, I knew Professor Hubble's grandson, Tower, the late Tower Hubble here in Princeton, who was a fabulous person. Anyway, a mathematician friend of mine, Professor, said years ago, when we were talking about this time capsule that had apparently been sent somewhere with Beatles tunes and music and art and literature, that the one sure way of establishing whether there was, quote, intelligent life somewhere else in the universe, if not here, would be indicating the existence of the concept of prime numbers. And if another being recognized that, it would indicate that their intelligence had advanced remarkably or sufficiently. Could you answer that, and I'll take my answer off the air?
Prime numbers, if I remember my high school math, being those that are only divisible by themselves and by 1. Is that correct?
Evenly divisible by themselves. All numbers are divisible by all numbers, but they have to be evenly divisible.
Yeah, to hold numbers.
With no remainder at the end, yes. Then you'd have a prime number. Right. I say that because in the movie Little Man Tate, there's a genius, elementary school kid. The teacher asks, is this number divisible? Which of these numbers is divisible by 3? And he said they all are. And the teacher meant evenly divisible, but she didn't say it, and so the kid was beyond the teacher's thinking. Yes, so...
Because the kid invented the teacher. You just demonstrated.
Exactly. So probably the caller is thinking about the Voyager record, which was an affixed bit of information and actually a record player that contains sounds of our species. Ann Druyan was the creative director of that, who co-wrote both Cosmoses, the first and with Carl Sagan, and the one that I had the privilege of hosting a couple of years ago. And so she's a very creative person and thinks deeply about culture and civilization and our future. And so they thought a lot about what information you'd put on there, but it had to be encoded in a way so that an alien would have some chance of knowing what you're giving them. You can't write it in English. They're not going to speak English or French or Esperanto, right? Or is that what's what you call it, Esperanto? Esperanto, thank you. So you have to be creative, and you have to ask, what language is universal? Truly universal, not just earth-wide. We so abuse the word universe on Earth. Miss Universe. No, she's Miss Earth, okay? Just get that straight, okay? Just please. All right.
She's misabused by the owner going backstage and walking through the dressing room.
So the universe, the language of the universe is mathematics, because it applies everywhere that we see, and the laws of physics that gird it. So if you want to communicate with aliens, you probably would want to do it in some mathematical way, and prime numbers would be evidence that they have not only figured out how to talk to the universe, because math is that language, but maybe we could find a way for us to talk with one another.
Well, guess what? We will have to leave it there for talking with one another for this time.
You left 15 minutes for us to talk about the whole universe?
This universe.
This.
We'll do a half hour next time, and we'll talk about a couple of others, too. Neil deGrasse Tyson, director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History, and host of the podcast and National Geographic Channel TV show Star Talk, which now has an accompanying book, and co-author with fellow astrophysicists Michael Strauss and J. Richard Gott of the new book, Welcome to the Universe, an Astrophysical Tour. And I'll just...
Welcome to the Universe. You got to say it right.
You say it.
Yeah, welcome to the universe. Yeah, okay.
I'm not even going to try. And I'll just add that the episode of Star Talk featuring Brian Greene premieres this Monday, October 17th at 10 Central on National Geographic Channel. And for more information about the show, you can visit natgeotv.com, natgeotv.com. Dr. Tyson, thanks again.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
My first guests are big stars in the world of sports, but they're here mostly not to talk about the art of passing, dribbling, and shooting, but to talk about the trend and the issue of athletes like Colin Kaepernick and now many others not standing for the national anthem before the games or doing other things to protest racial injustice in America. What you may not know is that Kaepernick wasn't the first major protest by professional athletes this year. In July, following the rapid succession of the shootings of Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, and the Dallas police officers, several different WNBA teams, including our own New York Liberty, began demonstrating support of the Black Lives Matter movement by wearing black warm-up outfits with phrases like hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag Dallas5 printed on them. Here is Tanisha Wright, a guard for the Liberty, speaking to the press after a game in late July. And I guess we don't have that clip yet. We will try to get it. She said, "We really feel like there's still an issue here in America, and we want to be able to use our platforms."
We really feel like there's still an issue here in America, and we want to be able to use our platforms. We want to be able to use our voices. We don't want to let anybody silence us in what we want to talk about. So you guys can ask away about anything that's happening in society. And it's unfortunate that the WNBA has fined us and not supported its players. So whatever you want to ask about that, feel free. But we'll only be taking questions about that today.
Tanisha Wright at a post-game press conference in July, and as you could hear, whoever transcribed that clip did a very accurate job. With me now are Swin Cash and Tina Charles, who played for Liberty this past season. And I will say this because Swin retired at the end of this past season, and were both outspoken about their involvement with the protest actions. Hi, Swin and Tina. Welcome to the Green Space in WNYC.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So Black Lives Matter and the issues central to the movement have been in the news regularly over the past few years, obviously. What made you feel the need to finally speak out publicly this summer? Who wants to go first? Swin?
Well, I think we were at a time in our country where a lot of not just African Americans, but I think everyone, humanity, watching people get killed day in and day out, and violence that was happening in the streets. And now with so much technology, you talked about the shootings that happened in Minneapolis and also in New Orleans. We just really got to a point where the players began to feel, what can we do? Like, this is an issue. It was one of those things where we started communicating with one another. Players were wondering, they were feeling, they were hurting. And as a veteran myself, getting phone calls in the middle of the night of hearing another player crying, asking why. Like, why don't we matter in our country? Why isn't anything being done? How can you kill somebody? How can it be live streaming and it be acceptable? How can people not have any type of empathy for just human life in general? And I think it just got to a point as a group and as a league, women, we understand what it is to be oppressed at some point. I mean, if you're a woman at some point, whether it's corporate America, whether it's in college, different things, you've had to go through some issues. And I think that's why we identified even more, not only because we're African American, but because we are women and we have fathers and brothers and uncles, and we understand what injustices have been happening in our country. And we felt that we wanted to use our platform to really bring awareness to it.
And Tina, I think the Minnesota Lynx were the first WNBA team to wear Black Lives Matter warm-up outfits, though quickly spread to at least 6 of the WNBA's 12 teams, I see. Was there any organizing or coordination between players on the different teams? How did that go?
Yeah, for sure. Swin, she's the VP of our union. And so, there's a lot of information that was given to us as far as what was going to be done in the league and how could the New York Liberty participate. I think just us... I'm born and raised in Queens, New York. I grew up watching New York Liberty. I saw it as not just a dream to play for this team, but also as opportunity to use our platform. So I think if any team in the league, if we wanted to take a stand, it would have to be New York Liberty. And, when we saw what Minnesota Lynx did, we just wanted to be on board with what they were doing and how we can support, our fellow sisters in the league.
Going back to Muhammad Ali's imprisonment as a result of protesting the Vietnam War, and Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Black Power Fists, in the 1968 Olympics, the history of professional athletes and activism goes back far. Were you inspired by any other athlete protests in the past, or did this just come up spontaneously as a present thing that you both felt you wanted to be a part of? Swin?
I'll answer that question, but I wanted to just add that the shirts that Minnesota Lynx wore first, they didn't just have Black Lives Matter on it. They had shirts that had also support for the police force, basically saying to pull everyone together. And they immediately got pushback from the chief of the union. The cops walked out during a game against the players not even being there to protect them. So it was even a deeper layer of issues that happened there, and I want to encourage most of you to go read even more about that. But in regards to my encouragement, I would say that we were just at a point in time where we had a decision to make, whether you stand up and use your platform or you worry about getting fined, you worry about losing sponsorship. And we don't make as much money as the men, but one of the things that I'm most proud of in my career, I've played 15 years in the WNBA, is that 144 women said, you know what, we could lose a lot right now. We can lose money, we can lose sponsorship, but we want to stand up and have our voices be heard. So yes, you can look back and pull from Muhammad Ali. You can look back and pull from Dr. King. There's a number of people, but at the end of the day, if you look at the civil rights movement, beside every Dr. King, there's also a Dorothy Height. There's other women that were part of the movement, and it wasn't just African-American women. And so that, for us, if you look at WNBA, if you see us linked arms, it's just not the African-American women. That's the difference between our league and other protests, is that you see foreign players, you see Asian, you see white, you see Indian. These are all different people that came together for a purpose.
You want to pick up on that, Tina? Do you feel it really brings a lot of different kinds of people together to do this?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think especially with our league and just other organizations that we put on the front line, as far as the LGBT, as far as breast cancer awareness, we have Green Week. So the fact that we were able to pick up on the Black Lives Matter movement, and it just wasn't African Americans that make up 70% of our league. It was every race. So I think the unity that we showed of how important it is to raise awareness to what you believe in and stand up for what you believe in, it was just amazing to be a part of. And being that it's the 20th season in the WNBA, I think that was the major highlight of this season. Now, listeners, we can take some phone calls if you want to call in for Tina Charles and Swin Cash from the Liberty, 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. And I know those of you who actually follow the WNBA are going, what? You have Tina Charles, the 2012 WNBA Most Valuable Player, and you have Swin Cash? Oh, man, 3-time champ. So 212-433-WNYC for you fanboys and fangirls out there, or for anybody who wants to talk about the issue. And anybody here in the green space, if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and one of our producers will come around with a microphone, and we can take your questions too. So you guys came before Colin Kaepernick. What did you think when you saw him doing it, and then all of a sudden it was a big national deal on all the networks? I think he's exercising his constitutional right, and I think he's forcing dialogue that we need to have, conversations that's necessary to have. I think everyone has an opinion on how you should do something and how you should go about it, but he's actually taking a stand and doing it, and he's using his platform the same way that we did. And I think he was very articulate as far as his research as to why he's kneeling instead of sitting down. So what he's doing is really amazing, and he's sparking conversations that needs to happen. In the same light, after our Olympic break, we were still trying to figure out how can we keep the conversations going. As you guys saw a preview of what Tanisha Wright and the rest of us decided to do, to have a media blackout where we were only answering questions towards the Black Lives Matter movement because we wanted the conversations to keep going. So I think it's really great what Kaepernick is doing.
And that's a different kind of protest. He, as everybody now knows, didn't stand during the national anthem and then started kneeling during the national anthem. What you did was, in a post-game news conference, you wouldn't take questions about the game. You would only take questions about the issues related to your shirts, right?
Yeah, and I initially started and I made a comment on the game. And so I made a comment about the game, gave them their bite that they could use, and then everything else was, this is what we're going to talk about. And so I thought it was very powerful, and I thought the way we went about it was very professional. And we've said throughout this whole summer, and even as we move forward, it's really about, at the end of the day, we want to bring awareness and have conversations. Tina and I can sit here. Some of my best friends, we don't agree on everything, but we can have respectful conversations and agree to disagree. Also, at the end of the day, like, my dad served this country 30 plus years. My dad seen more time overseas and defending our country than I saw him growing up at times. And so when people try to have these conversations and they throw back in my face or want to talk about, well, if you're protesting against the flag, you're protesting against our military. Well, let's talk about that. Let's have those conversations, because I think I'm pretty equipped to have those conversations with you.
Well, what do you make of the fact that people actually was surprised by that when it first came up with Kaepernick, that the pushback against it was, you're disrespecting our war dead. And that was not, I don't think, what he had in mind as even being relevant to it. I mean, maybe because the national anthem is a song that takes place during a battle. But the country is not just our war dead. The country is everything about our country. And I think Kaepernick was surprised by the fact that what the critics focused on was war dead, when he was looking at the country as a whole, and it's got great things about it, but it's still got oppression going on that we need to deal with, and he wanted to take a stand. Are you surprised, as the daughter of a veteran, that's where the pushback seems to rest?
I wasn't surprised, and I say I wasn't surprised because I think it's like anything. It's like if your mom or dad asks you a question and you don't want to answer it, you deflect to something else. And I think that's exactly what's happened. Is like, okay, we don't want to talk about what you want to talk about, but we're going to deflect and bring it to another issue. And so for me, as a kid whose brother served in the Army, cousin, grandfather, my dad, it's insulting because you cannot compare those two things. What our veterans and what our soldiers do and the sacrifices that they make, their families make to serve this country, it's so that I can make a decision whether I want to stand and be a part of this or if I want to say, no, we can do better as Americans. We can do better as a country. And so when he exercised that constitutional right, like Tina said, how can we sit here and try to figure out when it's okay to stand or when it's okay to kneel or do nothing? Like, who's dictating that? And I think that's the reason why conversations need to be had, intellectual conversations, and respectfully as well.
Let's take a comment or a question here in the green space. Who do we have? Let's see. It's hard for me to see with these stage lights. Who's got the microphone? Is it back there? Hi. All right. No?
You guys are
okay.
Like, they're like, we're not touching this.
No, that's right. Not in person.
I love you all.
Now, I can't see the phone lines from where I am, so I'm going to ask my producer, Megan, in the control room. Are the lines full? Okay. Yeah, I think people are. And now we do have a question here in the hall, I think. But, sometimes people will call in to say anything because they're anonymous. But when they get face-to-face... Hi. Okay, now we got you.
Okay. I love your show. Thanks for having us all here. So some people are discussing whether it's even appropriate to be having the national anthem played at the beginning of the sporting events. I'm just wondering if you have a take on that.
I think it's appropriate. I don't have a problem with the national anthem being played. We both played in the Olympics. We both have gold medals, and so we've gone and been able to be the only team. Thank you. And been able to be the only team that's standing there and hear your national anthem played when you know that everyone else in the gym hates your guts. And I also think that now you've seen like Megan Rapinoe, who is on the national team with soccer, and she's been getting to kneel. And I think she's eloquently said exactly why she's doing it, to support Kaepernick and what she feels are injustices. So I don't think that there's a problem with it at all.
Are there players who may not be inclined to display their politics in the athletic context kind of coming into conflict or dissension? Are there judgments going back and forth? Is it causing, dissension between teammates? Is it on your team at all, Tina?
I think when it got to a point of the fines, I think that's when it became a little complex. There's some players on your teams that financially can be in a space of taking a fine and standing up for what's right, and then there's those that's not, and then they have to think of what they want to stand for, and then it comes back to, well, if they really understand what's going on and thinking like, well, I'm not African American, so this isn't really my fight when it's about Americans and being united, so
that's got to drive you crazy, right? When somebody says it's your fight because I'm not
exactly. So you hear that as well. Yes. So for me, there was a game where I still continued in the light of fines. I still continued to wear my shirt inside out because I refused to be silent in the wake of the fines. I thought to myself, growing up in Queens, I think back in '99, you think of Amadou Diallo. You think of Sean Bell in 2006. So for me, it was the bigger picture of if I didn't stand up for my right, me being from New York and me bearing witness to what happened back in the day when I was younger and going home to my parents and asking why this happened. Now technology is booming and we're able to see everything. So conversations have to force.
How much were the fines?
500.
Yeah.
It's 500.
Yeah, you're talking about a $500 fine.
And then leading to suspensions as well.
Per game over a number of games, however long you did it. And then they rescinded the fines after a while, right?
Yes.
They did. That's what happens whenever you can stand together and you don't break off and go around. It's like anything. You want to change something and you stand unified, and that's how a movement works. It's how a union works, and we were able to get it done. But I do want to comment and say that thank you, because that's how you get it done. I want to comment and say that even when we were having, you have to understand, we're in a locker room, and people have different money issues, and there's foreign players, and there's everything that's happening. Yeah. It wasn't like an easy thing, okay, this is what we're doing, and everybody fell in line. It was, let's talk about it, let's figure it out. And then it became a point where the players who've been in the league a little bit more said, you know what, I'll pay your fine, I'll pay your fine, and we'll keep moving forward. So that's how a team operated.
And for the record, that's what locker room talk is.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Boom. That's what locker room talk is. Oh,
yeah, drop mic.
Confused the last few days.
I just dropped the mic and walked out there.
Right, boom. And WNBA President Lisa Borders eventually tweeted, appreciate our players expressing themselves on matters important to them, rescinding imposed fines to show them even more support. Mm-hmm. So you can applaud for that. Did that feel like too little too late? Did that feel like, oh, she's, condescending to us? Or was that like, okay, we got something done here?
No, for me it was like, okay, now let's come to the table, and what are we going to do moving forward? That was, I don't know how you felt, Tina, but that's how I felt.
No, I thought it was amazing. The fact that you were able to see a result from what you stood up for, for what you worked hard for. Just like I saw in the civil rights movement, what I saw in movies, what I read about. So to be a part of something as moving as that, it was really special to me. And now we're trying to figure out how can we engage with law enforcement and force conversations within communities and try to find a solution of how we could change the system.
My guests, if you're just joining us, Swin Cash and Tina Charles from the Liberty of the WNBA on their protests this summer and things that flowed from it in support of Black Lives Matter and relevant issues. And we can take some phone calls at 212-433-WNYC as we're here live in the green space today. We'll also go to our next audience member with a question, and we have somebody right over there. Hi.
Hi. We did this entire unit at school about whether you should stand or shouldn't stand for the national anthem. And do you think it's good that people are making a stand like this?
By the way, is school out today?
No.
This is part of the project, right? You're here for a project,
Do I need
right?
to report you to someone? No. I'm not going to put you on the spot. But sometimes we have one of the Brian Lehrer Show traditions has been that we have homeschool students call in to the show sometimes. Awesome. I mean, we don't solicit it, but it's something that's happened over the years, is that some people's parents who are homeschooling them actually use the show as kind of a midday public affairs-y thing on selected selected segments. So maybe that's the origin of that question. But anyway, what's the answer?
I would say, one, that's a great question. Two, I would say you live in the United States of America, so you have the right, whatever it may be, to stand, to kneel, to stand for, and then make that decision. Okay? That's my opinion. Now, your mom may have a different opinion, but as you get older, my mom once said to me, even when I was growing up and I would go to church, and I would go to church all the time, my mom would always tell me, at some point, you'll find the faith for yourself, and when you do...
Let me ask the control room to pick out a call. I can't see the callers from the green space stage on my computer out here, so if there's a caller you guys want to pick out, we'll go to a caller. In the meantime, maybe I'll ask you a basketball question.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Will you answer basketball? I realized, considering the topic, I don't know if you'll answer basketball questions. From what I've read, the WNBA would lose money and likely go out of business if not carried by the NBA teams you're affiliated with, like the Liberty by the Knicks. Assuming that's actually true, why do you think the league is committed to the existence of the WNBA?
I think Swin should answer that. She's a VP
of the union,
of
the
our
players' union.
So I'm going to let her handle that question.
Well, one, I think that I'll say this, the WNBA is the best league in the world, and players from all around the world want to come here and play for a reason. I will say that the business side, just like everyone else did when we had the recession that happened, the WNBA suffered as well. Of course, we get some support from the NBA. There are some teams that are profitable, but at the end of the day, please believe the WNBA being successful and being here is good business also for the NBA. I think when you support women, when you're inclusive and you understand that they also should have a platform, then that's good for your business. And as you see in corporate America, more people are starting to understand that we need to be at the table. So for the WNBA, we need to be here, we need to be present, and for young girls and young boys to look up and say, hey, I can be like the next Tina Charles. I can be the next Epiphany Prince and whoever else it may be. So for me, I think, yes, it should be. For people who don't know the game, professional women's basketball, can you promote the women's game? Like, I'm thinking as a tennis fan, there are different things sometimes that I appreciate about the women's game than the men's game. They're not exactly identical. What makes it fun and different from men's basketball? Would there be any answer to that?
I would have to say the skill.
Yeah.
What are you saying?
I would just say skill, period. With men, everything is athleticism. Jumping out of the gym, the dunks and everything. No, we have to practice our skill. As far as how much we play as a team. What's necessary for us to win is different than what's necessary for the NBA players, for the team in NBA to win. For us, it takes 5 to win, literally. And just knowing our offense, knowing our defense, the discipline we have to have, the patience you have to have, the development of the game. I would just have to say it's our skill.
Yeah, and it's amazing that, everyone loves Golden State right now. They move the ball, they shoot the ball. I'm like, well, we've been doing that for a number of years. But okay, and it's pure basketball, and it's fun and it's skills. And so I agree with Tina.
For sure.
But the criticism of Golden State is, it's really about one guy's amazing shooting skill, and that other teams have such incredible teamwork. And some people might have rooted for Cleveland over them for that reason, to take an NBA example. But do you think it takes more teamwork? Is that part of what you're getting at in the women's game? Because the men's game is more about individual showboating? And
more like one-on-one. Yeah, I mean, definitely throughout the league, you have amazing players that are one-on-one players. You have your Angel McCoughtry, Elena Deladon, Skylar Diggins. You have all likes of them. But I think for the elite teams down the road, when it comes down to it, the ones that made it are the ones that have discipline in their offense and in their defense.
Do you use the triangle offense like Phil Jackson tries to get the Knicks to do?
We use elements of the triangle. We do. We have a player like Tina Charles that no one can check her on a low block. We want to get her to basketball, and we want to kind of move off of her. And I know I'm talking basketball terminology, so let me rewind that a little bit. Tina Charles, very dominant. We can throw the ball into her, and she can score, which is great for us. But whenever they come...
What else are you into sports-wise, Tina? You a fan of other particular sports?
I love softball, actually. I know that was very left field, but I love softball. I love baseball.
Only if you're righty and pull the ball.
I love baseball. My mom was a season ticket holder of the Mets back in the days in the 80s, so I love to get out to Citi Field as much as I can. I know we just lost the wild card game, but we'll be back next year.
That's another one where, women's soccer, pretty big, women's tennis, pretty big. Do you think it's harder with basketball and baseball, the softball, being the pro women's game, that and basketball for some reason to catch on?
No, I think when it comes to all those other sports that you just named, I think I love personally team sports. I grew up as an only child, so I loved being around others, learning from others. how do they engage and have respect for others, just the discipline that they have and their approach to the game. Individual sports wasn't really necessarily something for me, but everyone loves one-on-one dominance. And I think you see that in Serena Williams. You see that in your Andy Murray, So for me, I'm all about team sports.
Swin, in terms of, it becoming big in the marketplace for a whole lot of fans.
I think that the issue that we've struggled with on the WNBA side is that everyone always wants to compare us to the men, and that's because basketball in the United States it's at the top. And so when a man's sport is at the top, it's very difficult for people to see it on the women's side and also respect it. So we have to fight with writers to talk about our players. We have so many great women that have so many stories, but if mass media only looks one way and is not diverse and doesn't want to talk about our stories, then it's very difficult for people to follow. You're going to follow Swin Cash if you know about me, if you identify something with me. Oh, she likes fashion. I do too. You know what? I'm going to go see her play. She's really cool. I'm following her social media. That's why it's all about branding and marketing. And it's the struggle for us is really getting to the mainstream media to let them cover us the same way that they cover the men. You talked about individual sports. Of course, people can see the dominance in Serena. You talk about women's soccer. Our men's soccer team is not that good. So everybody's looking at the women's team. I love our men's soccer team, but I'm just saying, so every couple of years when it's a major global event, you follow the soccer team. I mean, does anybody in this room know that 6 gold medals in a row, that's the most the women's basketball team has done? No one else has touched that globally. But do you hear those stories? It's like why are they dominating? Somebody needs to be close to them. Why? We're America. Don't we try to dominate everything? I mean, that's what we struggle with.
Kristen in Montclair, you're on WNYC. Hi, Kristen.
Hey there. I just wanted to thank both Tina and Swin for standing up and the whole team for standing up, because I know it's not easy, especially on social media with pushback, and some people just don't understand the message, or they're willfully misunderstanding. But I also wanted to ask if they are actively encouraging other teams and leagues to join in the protest, and if so, how are they doing that, and what responses they've received from other teams and other team members.
So thank you very much for your comments. We really appreciate the support. I would say that once we got back from the Olympic break, Phoenix, Indiana, a couple of teams have already started in the communities as far as not only hosting town halls, but behind closed doors, bringing community leaders together and having conversations with some of the local leadership. That's already started. I've had conversations already with the NBA as they're kicking off their league. You'll see even more social engagement from the NBA side. So this is really kind of a WNBA, NBA family thing where we're coming together and trying to make sure we're using resources, not just protesting and talk about it, but also putting dollars into these communities to try to bridge the gap, because it's really needed. And the way that we can do that is everyone loves sports. So we're trying to really bring people together using sport as a way to start the conversations.
Tina, you back with the Liberty next year? You signed?
Yeah, I'm back. I don't plan on going anywhere.
Feel good about that.
That's right, because she's one of the very best in the league. So, listeners, if you weren't aware of the WNBA before and Tina Charles before, now you've heard her. You have a sense of her as a human being. Maybe you'll tune in next summer and watch a little WNBA basketball. And Swin Cash, I'm going to, at the risk of embarrassing you, tell everybody what one of the first things is you're going to do now that you've retired from basketball, which is that I see next week you're being honored by the National Civil Rights Museum with their Freedom Award, which recognizes...
Thank you.
Recognizes outstanding individuals who have contributed greatly to civil and human rights. And she'll be accepting the award alongside people like Tawakkol Karman, the youngest ever winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and Brian Stevenson, who's been on the show, the high-profile lawyer, activist, and writer. Do you have any jitters about that?
It's a little bit. It's really an honor. Throughout my life, I always live by the creed, to whom much is given, much is required, and I've tried to live my life in a way to give back because of the platform that I have, and so I'm excited about it, and I'll be accepting the award, but not just only on my behalf, but for all the other women in the WNBA as well.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. And if you walked your dog for a dog, that sniff on the sidewalk is loaded with information that we can't even begin to perceive. Alexandra Horowitz teaches at Barnard College, where she runs the Dog Cognition Lab, and she's the author now of Being a Dog, Following the Dog into a World of Smell, which explains how dogs perceive the world through their most spectacular organ, the nose, and how we humans can put our underused sense of smell to work in surprising ways. Alexandra, welcome back to WNYC.
Thanks so much.
So dogs have been used to hunt and track people for generations. We know that. But some of these new things you write about are incredible. Like dogs are being used to detect cancer.
Exactly, yeah. They're being trained, this is pure research basically, to detect the volatile elements that indicate that there's cancer. They can do it on breath, in blood, in urine. There's good evidence that they're going to be able to do it on people.
Meaning early detection?
Hopefully. I mean, it's certainly earlier than we have instruments that can detect.
And you write that dogs can smell earthquakes before they happen. How does that work?
Well, there's some indication, still anecdotal, that they're smelling changes of smell that come with changes of weather. So, for instance, with a thunderstorm is an easier example. They might be noticing that there are smells from the earth that are lifted when there's low pressure right above the earth that indicates an oncoming storm. So they alert to that.
Could dogs alert people early enough to get people and other dogs out of harm's way of an earthquake?
Potentially, if they were trained to know to do that. So I think there's a lot in the dog's olfactory universe that they notice. But what working dogs do is they know to tell us when something happens. Most dogs haven't been so trained.
And dogs can detect counterfeit goods, you're right.
Absolutely. I mean, they can be trained on very small amounts of explosives. They can be trained to detect specific drugs, elements of electronics. I think the limits are our imagination, not really the dog's capacity.
Bootleg videos?
Sure. I mean, it could be, absolutely.
And explosives. When did dogs first get trained to smell out explosives?
Well, it's been happening for decades. It's only recently that it's ubiquitous, that you're going to see dogs in every airport and at every major event. And certainly dogs could detect that small amount of TNT or other explosive all along. It's just that they didn't know to tell us when they had.
So when we see police dogs at the airport or Penn Station, it's not that they're there to bite you if you're a criminal.
Well, I mean, some police dogs are trained in bite, right? But a lot of these dogs are detection dogs, and they're looking for illegally imported goods. They're looking for drugs. They're looking for explosives. They're looking for something unusual that shouldn't be there. So
listeners, do you have a story about the time your dog smelled something on you? Drugs, cancer, bedbugs, a foreign perfume? Call in and tell us about your encounters with a dog's nose and where it led you. 212-433-WNYC. Or maybe you have a question about how your dog's smelling habits, how its nose works, and what it can detect, or the limits of science in this respect. Call in to ask our guest, Alexandra Horowitz, author of Being a Dog, Following the Dog into a World of Smell. And she runs the Dog Cognition Lab at Barnard. 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. So here's a vocabulary word. Dogs' noses are stereoscopic as opposed to our noses, which are monoscopic. Is that
Sure.
like the same thing with music systems, mono and stereo?
Absolutely. It means basically dogs are getting a different odor picture in each nostril. So they're able to then recreate the smell of the world in 3D, the way we do with vision.
And what does that allow them to do, for example?
Well, so the way we open our eyes and see the world and can tell distance by our stereoscopic vision, they can smell how far away something is by the different odor sample from each nostril.
And you talk about the physical act of sniffing. Tell Donald Trump before the final debate tonight. How are the sniffing behaviors of dogs different than how humans sniff?
Well, Trump and all of us are actually kind of not very good sniffers. I mean, we have kind of a gross sniff. We just sniff in and out the same nostrils. But And we also take about 1.5 seconds to do a sniff, which is pretty slow. So dogs can sniff about 5 to 10 times a second. That allows them to get many more odor pictures into their nostrils. And then people studying fluid dynamics have shown that they actually exhale out the side slits of their nose.
Huh.
So that allows them to have a continuous image of the smell world.
Is that what you mean when you write that dogs have different sniffing tactics, different dogs do, on the air or on the ground, two of the ways that you mentioned?
That's actually something even separate. So they're sniffing things in the breeze. You'll notice sometimes a dog in a breeze with their nose in the wind, as it were. And then tracking dogs have their nose on the ground. That's smelling something that we could all, maybe some of us could smell. We don't put our nose that close to it in order to see what's been passed.
And they also exhale differently than humans.
Yeah, out the side slits of their nose is an amazing anatomical design to allow the smell to not be rushed out of their nose. If we want to get a smell out of our nose, we exhale it out. But dogs don't want to get a smell out of their nose. You know, they want to continue to have an odor picture of the world. So the side slits of their nose is where they exhale.
Joan in Dix Hills, you're on WNYC with Alexandra Horowitz. Hi, Joan.
Hi, good morning. I have a cute story that I had this German short-haired pointer, and she wasn't particularly that close to me, but for some reason, one day she just would not leave my side. I mean, she was like glued to me wherever my foot went. She followed right next to me, and I was a little nervous that what was she doing, and I went to the doctor to find out I was pregnant. So
wonderful. Yeah,
I mean, I thought that was quite clever of her.
Yeah, that's a wonderful indication. Probably dogs are noticing changes in our physical state all the time, and we're not really noticing that they're noticing. So, you know, pregnancy will induce a different smell of you, and minimum in the hormones that you're producing. Annoying, going at something on their leg. They go to the doctor and they find out they have a melanoma.
Marjorie in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi, Brian. You know, for all the times I have called this show because I'm crazy about some political thing, it's amazing that this is the time I get through. So here's my question. Why thoroughly?
You had to ask that question, didn't you?
Poop is always going to come up with this topic.
But this is in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people ask that because they think, well, of course they can smell it at a distance, so why do they need to get so close? And I think we kind of mistake our nose for theirs here. It's not that they're trying to detect whether it's there at all. They're trying to get a full measure of the smell, to notice all its details and components. And to do that, you have to get closer to a smell, us as well as dogs. So that behavior is perfectly normal. They're just seeing it more closely.
And there is something about dogs getting up into the rears of other dogs.
Precisely, same thing. They want to get all the information, identifying information they can about the other dog. I mean, every dog, like every person, has a signature scent, and dogs are interested in getting all of that information.
Now, for people, you can walk into a house with a strong odor, but after 5 minutes, you no longer smell it. I think that's why people will sometimes come into your own home and say, oh, what's that smell? Because you're not familiar anymore, or you're not sensitive to the odor of your own stuff. But if you walk into somebody else's house, you smell it. Do dogs reach a point where they can no longer reliably follow a scent?
Well, that's a great question. The adaptation is what happens to us, which means you go in the coffee shop, it smells great. 5 minutes later in line, there's no smell. Right. That's a normal process of cells. So probably the dogs also get adapted, but if you take a slightly different quantity or range of odor in your nose, then you'll get the scent again. In other words, they've adapted to that specific odor, but something changes, then you can smell it. So if dogs are always getting new bits of the odor sample, then they won't get adapted to the smell.
Stephen in Islip, you're on WNYC with Alexandra Horowitz. Hi.
Hi, thank you. So a while ago, I adopted a bloodhound, and I wanted to say Infowars.com, learn the truth, don't fall asleep. The election is rigged, Infowars.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa in Westchester, you're on WNYC. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
My question is, do dogs, does their sense of smell diminish as they get older? I have two miniature dachshunds, and they're both 15 years old. And one, when I come home, she's all over me. She wants to smell everything that I came into contact with during the day. The other one, he doesn't seem to really care. And I could put a piece of meat on the floor behind him or next to him, and he doesn't see it. He doesn't seem to smell it.
It's certainly possible that sense of smell diminishes over time in dogs because of disease or simply deterioration of cells. There is one reason why dogs might persist in smelling a little longer than their sight or hearing, which is that olfactory cells, the cells that do the smelling, actually regenerate every 30 days in us as well as in dogs. So we get new cells all the time. So it's likelier it would continue, but sure, it could get worse. And probably one dog may be olfactory over the genome devoted to olfaction than other dogs. But all dogs, I should say, are phenomenally better, more well endowed in these olfactory cells than we are. Long-nosed dogs, also, retrievers, pointers, have more cells than short-nosed dogs. So when they're untrained, they're probably going to perform at slightly higher levels than a small-nosed dogs, which is why you don't see a lot of pugs doing explosive detection work in the airports.
Alexandra Horowitz, my guest on WNYC. She runs the Dog Cognition Lab at Barnard and is now the author of Being a Dog, Following the Dog into a World of Smell. And Janet in Little Italy, you're on WNYC. Hello, Janet.
Hello. I have an anecdotal thing about my dog, but another question about another species. When I also have spent a lot of time on the Shawangum Ridge in Ulster County, and when I would let my dogs out in the morning, they would just stand on the lawn and sniff the air, and I swear it was just like they were reading the morning paper. They knew who'd been in the neighborhood. They knew what was going on just by smelling those invisible ribbons, I think, of odor that were passing in the air. But with regard to the horse, I do a lot of horseback riding up on the ridge as well. And there was an area that my very experienced horse and I used to go through on a regular basis up on the Shawangum Ridge. So this was about 25 years ago, and it was before the bear population had come back to most people's knowledge. And there was a section that we had always gone through without incident. And on this particular day, my horse totally freaked out. He did not want to go through this area. His nostrils were as big as baseballs. He was just a wreck. And I managed to get him through it on the way out, and on the way back, he wanted to race through it. And I realized that what was probably happening, because it was a place of big craggy rocks, was that he had probably smelled a bear there. And lo and behold, a month later, there was an article in the newspaper about the first bear sighting in 150 years or something up on the ridge. And I'm pretty sure my horse smelled it first. So do other species also have a more highly developed capacity than human beings to detect scents like that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, horses could be early bear detection animals for us. The reason we focus on dogs is because they live in this world with us, but have a kind of sensory parallel universe. But there are a lot of very good olfactory creatures.
Thank you, Janet. And I see there's no noxious scent receptor in the dog's brain. So does that mean for dogs there's no such thing as something that smells awful?
Behaviorally, it doesn't look like they find too many things repulsive. I mean, as any dog owner knows, the things that we find off-putting, dogs like to go right up to and take a good sniff of. So I think they sometimes avoid their own excreta, that unless they have some disease. But and I also will suggest that they sometimes don't like odors that we think of as clean odors, which we use to cover their odor. For instance, when a dog gets out of a bath, they usually don't stand there proudly admiring their smell, but go to roll in something, perhaps trying to get that odor off. But yeah, I think they view smells as information, not as good or bad as we do.
And lastly, I see from the book that you've been inspired by your dogs to become a better smeller yourself, and you've embarked on a smell tour of New York City. I feel like I spend a lot of time in New York trying not to smell too much. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought if I wanted to understand what it's like to be an olfactory creature, I had to follow my dogs. And so I first started smelling what they did, which is a little socially awkward. And then I've gone on smell walks with people who are trying to map the smellscape of New York City and other places. with a group, you go up and start smelling things. It turns quickly from being a kind of awkward situation to really fascinating, this whole level of information that we usually are missing. When you intentionally go to smell it, it doesn't feel as off-putting. And it's actually a delightful additional component of my life now, even in New York.
Really fascinating stuff. Alexandra Horowitz, author of Being a Dog, Following the Dog into a World of Smell. She teaches at Barnard, where she runs the Dog Cognition Lab. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Brian Lehrer Weekend. We're back on the radio Monday morning at 10 a.m. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at Brian Lehrer or Facebook.com/Brian Lehrer WNYC, where there's always a conversation 24/7.